All right, welcome everybody. Good evening. Welcome to another episode of Stories of a Colorful World's author conversation. I am your host, Kanika Mobley, and this week I am here with Kimberly Davis-Peters. Nice to see you.
Hello.
She is the author of 2 children's books, Ellie and the Rainy Day and Cocoa Tea and Honey. We are so excited to be speaking with you today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Nice. So before we get started in our conversation, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am a children's author of 2 books, as you mentioned. I started writing children's books in 2019, right before the pandemic. Great timing, I know.
Absolutely.
I am raising a beautiful, amazing 4-year-old little girl. She's like 4 going on 45. And that has been so much fun. I live in Ohio. So I do live in the Buckeye State, not a big football fan. Don't kill me for that. But yeah, and I'm super passionate. I kind of stumbled into writing children's books, super passionate about it, and really excited to talk to you all today. So thank you for joining and watching.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So you said you kind of like stumbled into writing. What would you say is your earliest memory of like an interest in like reading or writing?
My earliest memory of writing is kind of funny because when I was really young, kind of like about 6 or 7,
Mm-hmm.
when for a good portion of my life, I was raised by my father. And so when I would get in trouble, my punishment would be to write sentences. And so it started out as, punishment, quote unquote, but what I learned was that I really love to write. So it came from, let me just get through this, to now let me perfect my handwriting and let me see how many sentences I can get, and really falling in love with just like the craft of writing. So even today, I prefer, and I actually start out all of my projects with a pen and paper.
Wow.
I have to before I even get to the computer. So that's like one of my earliest memories.
Okay. Did you ever imagine yourself as like a writer?
Not really. I've always loved to read. I've always loved to write. I've always written in some capacity, even, in my corporate career. And when I was younger, I used to write songs and poems and things like that. But I never thought of it as an actual career. When I was younger, I wanted to be a singer because my dad was a musician. And then once I got older and got into high school, I fell in love with marketing. And so I really wanted to be in the marketing industry, in music of some capacity, and
Okay.
didn't really imagine it. But I always loved to read and write. And so, here I am today. Had I known then, I would have, had a ton of books under my belt by now.
Nice. So what exactly was your inspiration for Ellie and the Rainy Day?
Yeah, it's interesting. As I said, I love to read, and that has been a bonding opportunity with my little one. And so she was about probably 2 or 3 years old at the time, and she was in daycare. And at the daycare, they were having a book fair, and so I was really excited. She was really excited to go. It's a really well-known book fair. And so we get there, and there are hundreds of books in these cases. And as we're looking, of the hundreds of books that are displayed, there were literally only 3 with a person of color, a character of color on, as the main character in the book. And that was so disappointing because I thought this was going to be an opportunity for us to bond, pick out some books. And it was really important to me to find books that she could see herself in And so just to have that limited assortment, or those limited options was so disappointing to me. And I started having these conversations with people in my circle, my friends and my family. And in these conversations, they would say, well, you're a good writer. You should, write. And I would push back and say, but I'm not a children's author. I'm not a children's writer. And so as I kept having these conversations and hearing the same theme over and over, it sparked something in me, to the point that I felt it necessary that, well, if there's no representation, as a parent, I'm going to take control and create that representation for my little one if no one else is going to do it.
Nice.
So that was my introduction.
Wow. Wow. And only 3 books.
Only 3, and we bought all 3. And they were great. They were great books. And
right.
It was a lot of different emotions, because it was, it was shock. It was, I couldn't believe it. What year am I living in? This is, 2019 at the time. Fear, what does that say to my little girl? That if she can't see herself in the stories that she reads, what does that say about her self-esteem and her self-worth, not to be worthy to be included in, a book? And so anger, disappointment. I went through kind of all of the emotions just in that moment. And that, with the conversations I was having, triggered me to take some action.
Nice. And so first you wrote Ellie and the Rainy Day, and then you transitioned to like Cocoa Tea and Honey, which kind of like shares this message of like loving your brown skin and no matter what the shade, which is like beautiful messaging. So what made you decide to like focus on that for your second book?
With Ellie and the Rainy Day, it was really getting my feet wet, really, because I was still learning a lot about the industry. I didn't really plan to become a actual, author. I planned to write a book at the time. And so, with Ellie and the Rainy Day, there was a specific message about overcoming obstacles and children understanding that things aren't going to always go your way. And I really wanted, at the time, anyone who's a parent can understand that 2-3 age range, that's when children are, learning those types of scenario, or coming into those types of scenarios. So I thought it was important to have that message in a book. And after I finished that book and it was well received, I really started thinking about deciding that I was going to actually continue to write children's books, actually become an author of more books. And with that, I really wanted to focus on what my voice was going to be. And I knew I wanted it to be different than Ellie and the Rainy Day. I knew I had more to say. And I knew that there were a lot of issues that were bothering me in our society. And how can I create content that speaks to children from that? So with Cocoa Tea and Honey, I saw an episode of Blackish, and it was centered around, the topic was colorism. And Jennifer Lewis's character in that series talked about having gone to visit her cousins, and because she was too dark, she had to play in the backyard. And so that, just broke my heart, because number one, I know there's truth in that, even though it's a sitcom, but I know there are other, so many other people that have had a similar experience. And so I started thinking, those type of experiences really affect us and can be traumatic. And I've talked to some adults who said, who have told me, growing up, I thought I was too dark and people used to call me this and that. And I started thinking to myself, how could we reach children, or how could I reach children? What message, is there a message that I could write to reach children at a young age, to not only celebrate the color of their skin, brown, but also understanding that there are people that are going to be different than them in the world, and finding the beauty in that as well. And so out of that came Cocoa Tea and Honey.
Nice. And I know there are so many people who, you know, find value in like that messaging. Like I can think about, I remember having a kindergarten student, and her family is of like Dominican descent, and she is like a darker shade,
Mhm.
and then the rest of her family. And I remember her mom coming to me and just telling me at 5 years old, you know, how she just feels bad about herself and like down because of her dark skin, because her cousins tease her
Mm.
because they're of a lighter shade.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it just broke my heart to, you know, for a 5-year old to already be seeping in like those messages. And you know, how do people carry that
Mhm.
into their adulthood?
Absolutely. And the other part of that journey for me is that um, my little girl is very, very light. And so if we're being honest, we know that there are certain perceptions that come with being dark skinned and being light skinned. And, you know, when you're really light, there's that perception of privilege. And it started a little bit of panic in me because I don't want to raise a child who ever feels privileged because the color of her skin, things that she hasn't worked for, that she's gaining, compared to someone who's working just as hard but looks different than her. And
Right.
so I really wanted her to hear that message, to understand that no matter what you look like, we all have to, you know, work hard and should have the same playing field, um, you know, as we reach our goals.
Absolutely. And so now, with you said your daughter is a 4-year old now. And
She's
so
four.
you have these two books. How has like her response to mommy's books been?
She adores them, and every night we read every night, or almost every night, I should say. And you know, I let her pick out the book, and I'm just always so honored when she said, you know, she pulls out Cocoa Tea and Honey, because our bookshelf is, you know, very diverse. It's not just Ellie and the Rainy Day or Cocoa Tea and Honey. You know, there are other titles as well. I wanted to give her a very broad selection. And so when she pulls those books out, you know, she's super excited, and I'm reading to her, and she's filling in, you know, she knows the words to them, and she can kind of recap what the book is about. So that's, you know, it's sweet because I wrote the books. She's my inspiration, obviously. And so to know that they are reaching her the way I intended them to reach her is just, it's a feeling that's really hard to explain, but it's really good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you kind of like have her as your inspiration for both of these books. But what do you hope for like other readers to take away from it?
Absolutely. So, Ellie and the Rainy Day, like I said, it's really about overcoming obstacles. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with the book, Ellie and the Rainy Day is about a little girl named Ellie who's stuck in the house on a rainy day. She gets really upset because she wanted to play outside, and her mother steps in, and together they have a really fun-filled day. Doing different activities. And at the end of the day, she really finds out that there are rainy days can be fun after all. So I wanted just children to understand. I wanted to give parents a tool and a resource to use to explain that, you know, you are going to face some obstacles, and sometimes things aren't going to go your way. But what we cannot do is throw our hands up and, you know, throw a tantrum, or feel defeated. And so trying to really trigger children to find alternatives, or, you know, to overcome those obstacles. And with Cocoa Tea and Honey, it is a deeper message. So I really wanted it to be used as a resource, again, with parents, to start those conversations about skin color, that children can, even at a young age, start to become familiar with. Yes, we all, you know, come in different shades and different skin tones, but Another theme in Cocoa Tea and Honey is that shared experiences are really what we use to select our friends. So in this case, with children that young, it's, do you like to play on the swings? I like to play on the swings. Okay, let's go play on the swings and start building friend. That's how we build our friendships. You know, we don't say, well, wait a minute, what skin color are you? Let me check and make sure that that's acceptable before I decide if you're my friend. So I always try with these two books, I've tried to have a message for the children, but also create a really good content that can be used as a tool for parents to start having conversations. And even with Cocoa Tea and Honey, you know, the reality is even within a family, you just talked about as well, we all come in different shades, and that's okay. And so to have that conversation and, you know, so children can understand that, hey, my uncle's, you know, a different shade of brown, and that's okay. I still love him, or my aunt's this shade. And, you know, our family is beautiful because of all the different shades that we come
Nice.
in. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. I think just thinking about like the inspiration for like creating these texts and just the need in the world. What does diverse representation in children's books mean to you?
That is a really good question. Simply put, for me, our if we look at our world is very diverse. You know, we live in America. America is known as a melting pot. There's beauty in different cultures and different skin tones and, you know, different genders. And there's so much beauty and diversity. And I really feel strongly that children's books should represent the world that we live in. And unfortunately, today we don't see that enough, but that is, I do see a change coming with that, and I'm very comforted by that, very optimistic.
Absolutely. We do see, more books starting to come on the scene. Still not enough, but we do see the tides turning. Um,
Yeah.
what has been kind of like your experience as you've um, started to create these books and then publish them and put them out into the world?
It's been an interesting journey because I kind of jumped in with both feet. Like I said, I planned to write a book, and I didn't really know you know, what the rest of that journey was going to be like for me. And so I've become a student of the craft, and I've really spent a lot of time learning about the children's, you know, book industry, and, you know, what children's books require, and, you know, the different formulas or options that you can use. And it's been so much fun because I'm like a lifelong student. I love to learn about things. So that has been really fun for me, to learn just something entirely new that I did not know. But at the same time, trying to, and I have a marketing background, but trying to market the book and introducing myself as an author to audiences, because I am an introvert, can sometimes be challenging. And, you know, just really reaching readers and learning about my audience and who they are and what their needs are, and, you know, what their challenges are that they are facing in their homes are. And doing all of that at the same time can sometimes be very difficult. Also, I work a full-time job. So I do work in corporate America, and I'm somebody's employee. So doing that for 40 hours a week, and then also being a business owner and an author and wearing so many hats can sometimes get very tiring. Many times I'm up until midnight, after everyone in my house has gone to bed, but that's when my best ideas come. So it's been a very interesting journey that sometimes is frustrating, and I feel defeated. sometimes when I have those small wins, I feel really, really excited and really inspired to keep going. And so it's been an interesting journey, but really fun. And I'm still really happy to be writing children's books.
Nice. Did you find, I know some authors um found inspiration in varying ways, especially like during this pandemic. So did you find that you had um a little more creativity during this time, or did it feel like, okay, this is my time of like, I need to kind of like unwind and break to just deal with the reality of life?
That is a good question. So Cocoa Tea and Honey came out in June of last year, and it was already, the ball was already rolling at the beginning of the year, because it takes about 6 to 9 months to get a children's book to market. And so it was already in production, and then the pandemic hit. And I was very fortunate to be able to work from home, as was my husband, and the little one. She was pulled out of daycare, and so it was really just kind of getting used to the new normal of everyone being in this one space all the time, and that was, it was just different. You just have to kind of figure out your new normal. So there was a lot of stress, I think, at that point, but I still felt inspired to keep going. To be honest, when George Floyd died, that really, and then the protest, and, being in the house and seeing it every day on TV, and the protest, and not really, knowing what was going to happen day to day, that I didn't obviously know George Floyd, but just understanding our history as African Americans, it it touched me in a way that I did not expect. And so I did have to kind of pause, and I lost inspiration, for the book at that point, because I was just dealing with, you know, that emotion of, I can't believe we're in, 2020, and something like this is happening. You hear about Emmett Till, and you hear about people, African Americans in our past, that have lost their lives unjustly. But this was different because this was in our time, and this was on TV. You hear stories, but you have social media today, and seeing it just, it was terrible. So I did lose a little bit of inspiration, coupled with the pandemic and having a book out, and how people are not knowing where their next meal is coming from. People have lost their jobs. Buying something, whether it be a book or what have you, is really not, I don't expect it to be anyone's first priority. So I didn't feel comfortable, doing that. It just felt like, it felt very fake, like, hey, I don't know what you're going through, but you want to buy this book? It just, that's not who I am as a person. And so I did kind of pause and have to re-strategize, kind of how I was going to roll things out. So I had to take a lot of self-care. I had to take a lot of steps back, and kind of understand what was going on with me, inside of me. I still had to be, parent, still had to be a wife. My life kept going with all these things happening around me. And so I'm not really a good person of taking care of myself first. I'm used to taking care of everyone else. And then if there's a little bit left, then I'll take that. But this was probably one of the first times in my life that I had to just, I gotta stop. I gotta pause, because if I don't, I'm not really sure what's gonna happen, next. And so I had to regroup and rethink, and just understand that, take it day to day. What do I need right now? Maybe I need 5 or 10 minutes to myself, or, take a walk, or I've really fallen in love with gardening. And
Mm.
so, getting out in the yard and, becoming one with the earth, growing something has been
Right.
very therapeutic for me. And I wasn't expecting that. So I had to find some ways to really give myself that self-care, which was a great growth opportunity, for me. And then when I felt strong enough, I kept going, but it wasn't until I felt ready.
Right. Nice. I think
Yeah.
that's one of the beauties of, 2020
Mhm.
is that it really forced us all to kind of like slow down,
Yes.
take care.
Mhm.
Um, just like you, I think I consider myself an introvert too, and like having people and not having that space,
Mhm.
to kind of like unwind. It's like, okay, how do I find that space since
Mhm.
more people are in the house and everything is in one space?
Yeah. 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 The other thing I would say is I've always I love my family, but I live about 2.5 hours away from nearest family. I have family in California and different states, and I've always been a family person, but I really missed my family. When you can't go see your family, it was something I was not expecting to physically feel that, that distance. And so, of course, using Zoom and, talking more, I have weekly chats with my mom, and she's expecting it. And if I miss a week, she's letting me know, hey, I don't know if you were busy last week, but you forgot to call. So, I think it strengthened the bonds that I've had with, immediate family. And I really appreciate those relationships. And whether they know it or not, they, have become kind of my tribe of being able to lean on and fall apart on, with, and be vulnerable, and really just creating a space for me that I didn't know I needed to be vulnerable and be myself, and giving me the strength and kind of the push that I need sometimes to say, oh, okay, you'll be okay. We love you. You're strong. Okay, go get back out there. Go do it, And so I just feel so much stronger after, I've had some of those conversations with
Nice. I love that. I love that. What would you, I guess, thinking about like that piece, what would you, or what advice would you give to anyone who's like thinking or aspiring to be a writer?
them. Just do it. Um, yeah, there's no there's no right or wrong way to become a writer. If you have a dream to write, please understand that your voice is just like it's special, and it's different, and you see all of these different pieces of work out on the market, but there's nothing like what you are going to create. So definitely follow that, and don't wait, because it could haunt you. You don't want to be filled with, well, I could have and I should have, and years later when you're really old and looking back on your life and wishing that, having regret that you didn't write that book, or write that blog, or whatever, write that film, whatever the case may be. The world needs your voice, and that's kind of what I've learned in myself, as well, that I write differently than anyone else, and very unique, and the world deserves that. So if you have a story within you, definitely go after it, and don't be afraid to.
I love that. Yes, the world deserves your voice.
Yeah.
Nice. So do you have any with your daughter any kind of like special story time rituals?
We read pretty often. I would like to say every night, but sometimes I get tired. I'm going to just be 100% honest.
Yeah.
And so, yes, we do have nighttime rituals, after we brush teeth and get ready to get in the bed. And it really is the best part of my day, getting into bed with her and letting her pick out the story and, just having that bonding time. It started out, of course, with me reading to her. And fortunately, even when I'm tired, she'll remind me, oh, wait, no, we forgot a book. And the interesting thing about that is sometimes she gives me grace and she'll say, I want to read tonight. So she's 4. She's not a full-time,
Right.
full-blown reader. Right now we're working on sight words, but just to hear her interpretation of a book is so cute. And, I get to rest a little bit as well and kind of take a break. So that has been, like I said, it's my favorite time of the day after all the chaos and, working at a job and, working on my books and things, to come home and just have that kind of relaxed time with her. And, I would hope it's as special to her as it is for me. But we do that often, and she is looking forward to it every night.
That means it is special to her.
Yes, yes.
Have there been any books that have been like especially in rotation during different phases of her life?
Absolutely. She doesn't always pick my book, I will say. And when Cocoa Tea and Honey was, when I got those copies, um, I was waiting for her to pick out Cocoa Tea and Honey, and then she
Right.
brought something else, and I'm like, oh, okay, maybe tomorrow, I guess. Um, but yeah, so there are a couple. There's a book called The Library Book by Tom Chapin and Michael Mark. It's a cute story about a little girl on her day at the library. She loves that because it's kind of sing-songy.
Right.
And so that one we actually wore out. The cover came off, and you read a book and you just don't think it could come apart like that.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, this back cover came off too, but we got the middle, so we're gonna
right. Keep going. Keep pushing.
going. Yeah, we actually need to get a new copy of that one. There's another book called Black Girl Magic Sprinkles by Shawnetta Anderson that is absolutely adorable, and it talks about the possibility of what you can be. And so she loves that one. There's also a really cute one called Bedtime Bonnet by Nancy Red. And, we're in that phase where we're putting on a bonnet every night. And so she really connected to that. And she loves that one. And then there's one called Maya Teaches Confidence Through the Alphabet by Leslie Crawford. And that's an adorable book that talks about different careers through the alphabet. And so, to have her go through and say, I want to be that. And, what does this mean? It has sparked some really good conversation to say, okay, well, a nurse does this, and, a firefighter does this, and she's in that question phase as well. So that's been a really good book in rotation.
I love those. I love that now there are so many books that do so many different things, and ones that inspire in ways that we didn't even necessarily think about before, but just the messages that they send and the ways our kids have the ability to be inspired in ways that maybe we didn't as children is really makes it hopeful for what the future can bring.
Absolutely. I don't recall any books with African Americans. Growing up myself, I can't think of one. There were a lot of books that I enjoyed, like The Babysitter's Club, um, Beezus and Ramona, Pippi Longstockings. And if you were lucky, like Babysitter's Club, they had the one black girl. So if you were lucky, you got like the one black character.
Right.
For one of those books or what have you. And I didn't really think about how it impacted me. I think now I do wonder what having that kind of having access to those types of books with more Black characters, what that could have done for my confidence and, self-esteem as a little girl, to say, hey, she looks like me, and I want to be that. Luckily, I mean, I turned out okay, I guess. But I just, I enjoy being in this moment with so many other amazing authors that are putting out content, because I do sometimes think about a child reading Cocoa Tea and Honey and imagining them as an adult. And has my work impacted them to be more self-confident? So I'm so humbled to just be in the space and, being on a bookshelf and have parents and children say, I love your book, and, it meant so much to my child, is just one of the most humbling experiences.
That is amazing. Thank you for what you do.
Well, thank you. I couldn't do it without people being willing to, or wanting to read it, so it's really the parents and children. I would say thank you to them as well, because I couldn't do what I do without them.
Nice. So are you reading anything good these
With the
days?
So I do love, just like I love pen to paper, I also love a physical book in my hand. And for years, I fought it, because my life, as you get older, become more of an adult, your life gets busier.
Right.
So, I have work, I have, cooking and cleaning and parenting and all those things. And I don't really have time for a physical book. And so I've really been leaning on podcasts and audiobooks, which is, outside of how I would like to read. But, if I have a 35-minute drive to work. And so I try to use that time, to read, but still, I don't have a lot of time, The most recent book that I actually really got into was Michelle Obama. Who I call her Auntie Michelle. She just doesn't know that, she's my auntie. But no, amazing book. Amazing book. I have not gotten a chance to really read another book since then. I think that was last year, I want to say. But I do have on my list A Promised Land by Barack Obama. That's my next one. And outside of that, I did briefly read through, it was like the second reading for me, the Total Money Makeover.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was, just January, trying to get my finances together. I don't have one particular genre, or, that I kind of gravitate toward. It just depends on what I'm feeling at the moment, or what I'd like to get into. So I really like Brene Brown. I love her books, but, I love a good, I love a good mystery. I love a good love story. So it just kind of depends. But I am a very diverse reader.
Okay. So do you have any projects that you're currently working on?
Yes, I do. I have a book right now in production. I am so excited to share it with the world. I'm looking forward to releasing it probably around June of this year. And it is centered around good character and those good character traits, and tying them into possible careers for children.
Okay.
So, the premise is, be a good person, and that will open a door of possibility for you. That's really what I'm trying to drive home. And then I'm always constantly writing. So I do have about 6 or 7 other books that, have been written, just aren't in production quite yet.
Okay. So always moving the pieces, getting those books into play. I love it.
Yeah.
So here at Stories of a Colorful World, March, our theme for March is leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And so, is there any one, either like word or phrase or quote, that kind of like represents leadership for you?
Absolutely. So in my day-to-day corporate job, I actually do lead a team. And I've had a good chance to obviously think about that, especially with the pandemic, because, everyone has a different situation. I'm very sensitive to the needs of my team. And one thing that has been a constant reminder is the word trust. And
Mm,
so that's what, I would say, to be a leader, it's so critical. You can't be a leader without building trust with the people that you expect to lead. Because if there's no trust, you're not moving forward. You may get people to do what you ask them to do, but for them to do it with passion and be willing to follow you sometimes with very little direction, you need trust for that. And everyone can't be a leader. There are a lot of people with titles,
right.
but that's very different than a leader. And I've had, great bosses. I've had horrible bosses, to the point where I'm in my car crying because I just
Mm,
don't want to be here, And so using those experiences and having the opportunity myself to be a leader, I think it's so important to build that trust with my team before we do anything else. Because once that trust is built, then I can say, here's my vision for our team, and this is how we're moving forward. And because that trust is there, they're willing to say, okay, I don't quite understand how we're going to get there, but what I do know is you are, you are a person that I trust. And because I trust you, I will follow your lead.
nice. Yes, that trust is so important.
Yeah.
It is so important. It can move mountains.
Hmm.
Nice. So, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been such a pleasure speaking with you, hearing your inspiration, and just really thinking about like your journey throughout like this space. How can people stay connected with you?
Yeah, so please, you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Ellie's Bookshop. That's Ellies Bookshop. You can also visit my website, which is elliesbookshop.com, to pick up Ellie in the Rainy Day, pick up Cocoa Tea and Honey. And we are not stopping with 2 books. We're definitely going to be adding some more as we go. So I do welcome everyone to come along with me on this journey.
Awesome. And we're going to make sure that we drop the links to those in the chats, making sure that we put that in the comments. And everybody, don't forget, you can go to www.storiesofacolorfulworld and check out our leadership picks for this month. We have some really great titles that you can choose from. And we're also carrying both Ellie in the Rainy Day and Cocoa Tea and Honey in our Stories of a Colorful World author conversation collection on Bookshop. So just one more thing, we will be, as the world starts to open up, we are going to start being at different events. So this Saturday we'll be at the Bedtime Book Festival in Brooklyn, New York at Herbert Von King Park. And that is 670 Lafayette Street in Brooklyn between Tompkins and Lafayette. And there are going to be kids who are going to be out there reading some books that they've created. The author Daniel O'Brien will be reading his I Am the Midnight Robber for kids, and we'll be sharing a read aloud and also have some books on hand to fill those bookshelves. So meet us there at Saturday, March 6th at 10:30 a.m. at Herbert Von King Park if you're in the Brooklyn area. And until next time, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you.